Hey folks, and welcome again to this edition of Scholars Vintage Sanctioned. This is Matt Orfanello here with Eric Dupuy.
I'm psyched to be here for this. We're right in the wake of Vintage Champ, so the metagame has really been shaken up. There's been some new printings that have impacted things, and some new strategies that have emerged, and some stuff that you will not believe. I can assure you of that. There's been some real innovation going here at Scholars, and I look forward to seeing how it continues to evolve.
Before we get started, just a shout out to Dave Tassinari and Scholars Games for hosting this tournament, Eric for getting the whole thing started, and TheEndStep for making these videos possible.
So for this video, we're going to see myself playing against Borg. He's on a fish list. Now I'm on a list that's not typical for me at all. It's Rug Delver. I really wanted to be on camera in the first round because I had no idea if I'd be making top 8 or not. I'd never even shuffled this list up, but it looks very interesting. And it actually top 8'd Vintage Champs. It's kind of a new breed of deck in terms of a lot of counters and creatures, and it gets rid of all of the stuff that you'd expect in a vintage deck in terms of full power. It doesn't have all of the moxes. It doesn't have Time Vault Key, Tinker Blightsteel, no black for Yawgmoth's Will. And there's some interesting strategy that goes along with that. I've been trying to parse this out with Rich Shea a little bit, trying to get to the core of what theories are going to hold up in tournament practice. And what this does is it removes the black and tries to beat Workshops by playing the best cards against Workshops, Ancient Grudge, 1-mana removal spells, and has simplified win conditions so you can stick a single card and then ride it out to victory. And also Gush is usually where you want to be in the control matchups. Now, I've been playing Dark Confidant lists because it's better against Workshops, so you kind of switch stuff around where now your colors are better against Workshops, but your engine is better against control, and the results are interesting. It's not as overall powerful, but it offers a lot of resiliency, and it gives you a lot of room for some powerful plays if you time them right.
And now on the other side of the table, Borg is playing a pretty interesting fish list. He's got all the right creatures in my opinion. He's got the Dark Confidence for his card advantage, Snapcaster Mage so that he can flash back his counter spells, removal spells, Ancestral Recall, and even a Demonic Tutor if he wanted to. Trigon Predator, pretty nice against his against the artifact matchup. And he's even got City of Brass because that's a nod to the 4 colors.
Yeah, that's a completely different direction. So on my list, I tried to simplify and play as few colors as possible. His list says, you know what, we're going to play Deathrite and City of Brass, and we're going to play all of the best cards. Now, here we are. Look at the power level. Borg's looking at a first turn Jace. On the other side of the board, I've got a Delver. We'll see how that holds up. He has some options here. If he doesn't bounce the Delver, Jace may be dead next turn off of a flip. So he's got a choice to make. If he does bounce it, then basically Delver's just going to keep coming back down, and he's not going to get very much value out of the Jace except for stalling me out. So it looks like he's gambling here.
Yeah, he chose to brainstorm. He could have also plus Jace to Fate Seal you and make sure that there's not an instant or sorcery on top of the library. Could have interacted with the Delver in that way.
Absolutely, that'd be a very relevant line. Here we've got a misstep battle over Deathrite Shaman. So Deathrite sticks. His board is really developing well here, so this is quite a bit to overcome. All right,
Delver trigger.
Taking a peek for Delver.
No reveal.
That's a huge setback there.
Yep, not where you want to be.
So let's see. I mean, this is a lot to answer. Deathrite will run away with the game eventually. Delver's gonna need to flip in order to race anything. So cantrips here could be helpful to try and set up the flip. The deck does play a lot of instants, so we've got a Lightning Bolt.
Lightning Bolt for the Jace.
Uncontested.
1-mana answer, and another Delver, so he's potentially looking at a pretty significant clock.
It's a huge swing.
Yeah.
That bolt is an absolutely huge swing.
Now, I know he has another Jace in hand, so does he want to use this Wasteland right away and get rid of one of your colors, or does he want to just play a Jace? Are there any fetch lands on the table? Yeah, so he can just play a second Jace this turn, although it's not going to be very effective versus double Delver, especially if they flip.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to tap out the Deathrite, wouldn't be able to block one of them. If they flip, the Jace would be gone. If they don't flip, it'd still be getting picked down to 1. So this is a dangerous situation. Still
Yeah.
no flipping. That was one of my reservations about the list. Is if Delver was just a 3/2 flyer for 1 blue, totally different story. But a lot of the times he's just a 1/1. So getting in there.
Offering the trade for the Dark Confident, easy trade to offer. And this is not like Legacy where you have 4 brainstorms that you can potentially use to set up the Delver flip. Although, in my opinion, if you're using your brainstorm to set up Delver in Legacy, you're probably not using brainstorm to its fullest potential. Regardless, you have the option, and you do not have that option in Vintage with only the 1 brainstorm.
Yeah, you end up supplementing with Ponder and Preordain. Mystical Tutor is always going to get something that can flip it as well. So Goyf looks to threaten here. I mean, without the Jace on board, Goyf is a very legitimate threat here.
So Borg revealed the Jace that he put back off the Jace brainstorm for his Dark Confident. He might have been able to sequence that a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, he has cheaper cards in hand, so he may not have been thinking down the line toward Dark Confidant actually surviving. That may have been more of a bait to try and keep counters in his hand. But yeah, that 4 damage should certainly become relevant.
Right now. There it is.
Lots of damage now. So now I have 9 power on board. Pretty easy to pump that more with a sorcery. We haven't seen one of those yet. So
although he does have the Deathrite Shaman to sort of keep things in check.
Let's see where we go here. Oh, Planeswalker in the graveyard as well.
Can't remove that with Deathrite. Swinging for 9. He's got to get in the way right here because, if he doesn't block, it takes the 9, goes down to 2. He's more than likely going to die off the reveal for the Dark Confident.
Yeah, Deathrite's not in life gain mode here, so. Oh, Young Pyromancer just piling on.
Well, now he can gain a life, but he chooses not to.
Just packing it in without showing me too much more of his list. That was a very bad situation. It started out extremely good for Borg, and it went south when he was unable to hold on to that Jace. Delver is a very interesting card in that regard. It can make the Jace plan almost irrelevant, not quite to the degree of True Name Nemesis, but it comes down early enough that it's really difficult to evaluate. Is that a card that you want to be force of willing? Is it going to be okay? Are you going to be able to race it? In Borg's list, he may need to be a little bit more aggressive dealing with those Delvers. I know they look not very threatening, but he doesn't have a lot of ways to deal with them once they're on the board. He's got a couple of Trigons to block. He's got a little bit of removal. But yeah, they're tough.
I think there was at least 2 turns where he probably could have activated Deathrite Shaman to shake things up a little bit. So against you, he's probably going to bring in the Pyroclasm. Potentially, I would bring in Abrupt Decay.
Absolutely.
Potentially the Dark Blast. I think that's probably about it.
Yeah, Dark Blast would be reasonable. Pyroclasm is more where you want to be. The problem with a deck running Young Pyromancer is it could just explode with tokens, and Dark Blast could just leave you wondering what you're even trying to do.
Yeah.
You pretty much need to mop up the whole board. Of course, Tarmogoyf is going to survive almost any removal except for Abrupt Decay. Any kind of sweeper is probably just going to pump him. So Goyf is going to be strong in this matchup.
As far as things that I would take out in his list, probably I would definitely take out the Hercule's Recall, probably Ancient Grudge, maybe even shave a Jace.
Yeah, Jace is going to be really hard to get to stick, and against Goyf, he's amazing because you can just bounce it and then play some guys, stabilize, potentially chump block, get those extra brainstorms in.
Yeah.
But yeah, versus the rest of the cards, like Young Pyromancer, bouncing it is almost irrelevant. So.
He could probably also swap his Flusterstorms for Red Elemental Blasts in this matchup, I think.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting hedge. Delver is a problem, and you really don't want to have to be in a situation where you're going to have to force a will it, because that sets you back so far.
Right.
And I'm still running stuff like Ancestral, and Gush, so you don't want me to get way ahead on card advantage. If that happens, I'm going to be able to protect whatever's on board from anything except for Abrupt Decay.
So on your side of the table, let's see, we got this list right here. Your sideboard, you have 2 Umezawa's Jites to bring in.
Yeah, Jite was a totally reasonable card. Pyroblast is totally reasonable.
Yep.
The rest of the cards are completely dead in this matchup. I've got a bunch of slots toward Workshops in terms of Ancient Grudge and Hercule's Recall. And then I have 7 cards versus Oath, essentially, which is 4 Grafdigger's Cage and 3 Nature's Claim. Oath is a nightmare matchup for a deck like this.
Yeah.
You cannot win without your creatures, and that plays right into their plan. And there's really nothing you can do as far as tricks during combat, you know, in terms of getting your guys out of the way by swordsing it and getting around Gristlebrand. It's really tough.
So things that you shave, probably Steel Sabotage and Flusterstorm?
Yeah, those are definitely options. You know, Flusterstorm can push through your guys, but Spell Pierce is a little bit more versatile in terms of being able to counter Jace.
Right. Turn 1 Bob. That can really that can set the game. That can set the pace for the game pretty well.
Yeah, Confidant, if he can protect it, is definitely going to run away. It's one of those cards that you build around in terms of generating incremental card advantage and look to trade 1 for 1. And the 2 damage is how he's actually winning with his list compared to other Grixis lists where they might look to assemble Time Vault Key. So getting rid of it is really setting him back quite a bit.
Yeah, and you were fortunate for you were able to answer it before he got a card off of it.
Yeah, now with the Sapphire up, quite possibly having counter backup as well, it makes a difficult spot. I mean, if he Force of Wills there and gets Flusterstormed or Spell Pierced, he's just so far behind.
Yeah.
Now here's the real spell. This is the one that matters.
Pyroblast. Gonna meet Mental Misstep, probably. Yep.
That is one interesting thing about this list. The ability to run 4 Mental Missteps, as well as all of those other counters. If you get ahead, you're likely to stay ahead.
So Borg has a pretty dead-looking Library of Alexandria I saw in his hand. He's down to, what is it, 4 cards right now?
Yeah, that's a very long way from active library.
Yeah, he would need a like an ancestral to resolve for him to even come close to.
Yeah, an ancestral
activating.
plus a draw step would get him back up to 7.
Now, if his turn 1 Dark Confident had stuck around, that would have been a much more powerful hand.
Absolutely, he would have got right back up to library. He would have been outdrawing me 2 or 3 to 1.
So the Delver comes down, uncontested. Borg ripping a Mox Sapphire. Strip Mine. He noticed that you missed a land drop, so keeping you on 1 mana and only blue seems pretty relevant.
Yeah, mana seemed like an issue with this deck throughout the day. There were times where I had green mana and red spells in hand. There were times where I didn't have access to green for Tarmogoyf. So it's interesting. I'm not sure whether or not the list is really the issue, or whether or not I'd have to use my cantrips more aggressively to try and find those extra mana. For the most part, you got by even if you didn't have the colors you need, and eventually you tend to draw them. So
keeping the island off of the Preordain, I mean, it develops your mana. It doesn't fix your colors. Borg playing 2 things out of his hand, and really, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna play a Jace? Abrupt Decay. Now, I don't see why, sitting on library, he would go down to 2 cards. I think in his position, I would probably hold on to the Mox and maybe even the land.
So I have the Delver follow-up off of that Preordain. I've got some 1-mana counters in my hand at this point, I believe, so the thought process is just get a guy, protect it, and win. I mean, Abrupt Decay obviously makes that plan fairly difficult. Let's see here. We've got a Demonic Tutor. Typical targets, Ancestral Recall in his deck would be really good.
Yeah.
That's probably the best play. Jace would certainly be an option, but again, versus Delver, you're going to bounce it and then kind of play back and forth. Lightning Bolt makes this matchup much more difficult for Borg. I can't really sideboard them out.
Yeah.
I'd like to. In general, I wouldn't want Bolt in against a deck like this, but that's just what this Rug deck is trying to do. It wants the reach, so it has that nice added benefit of being able to make Jace very difficult to use effectively.
Yeah.
If you're Fate Sealing with them instead of Brainstorming and they don't have the Bolt, you're just giving up so much value. And if all you get out of it is a single Brainstorm for 4 mana, it's really not a game breaker.
Nope. So he's making the decision between the Jace and the Ancestral. I think he chose the Ancestral, which I would probably choose as well.
I definitely would. When you're running Snapcaster, it's great to have that in the pin.
Yeah, even if it gets countered, you still have the opportunity to get value off of it.
Yeah, he's running Yawgmoth's Will as well. He's got the powerful cards. You go for them and you try and make them work.
Mental Misstep.
Paying the life. signifying that I more than likely have other counters in hand.
Hmm.
More than likely that would mean I'd have Flusterstorm based off of his mana base because he went Demonic Tutor Ancestral. So Flusterstorm there would have been the card to keep up.
Showing the force off of the Delver trigger. Now, the fact that you're missing land drops and you're not playing creatures, well, you don't have green or red mana, so you might have a few creatures in your hand, but likely you have more than one response. Oh, the Jite. Now, that's going to prevent any of Borg's creatures from being relevant for the rest of the game if you get even one trigger.
At that point, I realized Borg only had one card in hand. It felt safe to tap off of those 1-mana counters. Having the Force of Will and Yawgmoth's Will, I'm able to just force that if I've got a blue card in hand.
Yeah. I mean, he knew you had the Force. He's at 15 life. Yawgmoth's Will seems like one of those cards that's important enough that you can sort of sandbag it for a couple of turns to really get the full value out of it. He was probably hoping to Abrupt Decay either the Jite or the Insectile Aberration before you have a chance to get value off of it, but I might have sandbagged that will.
Well, the Jite makes it a very serious clock. I'm hitting for 7 a turn, so that's the other factor.
That's true.
As well as if I didn't have a blue card there, he's just going to potentially win the game off of that play.
Yeah.
It was a desperate situation no matter what. Either I don't have a blue card and he actually manages to win. If he lets me untap, then I'm going to have who knows how many 1-mana counters.
Mm-hmm.
If you're betting that I have blue cards, they're almost certainly counters because otherwise I'd be digging with the cantrips. So
right.
Just a matter of how you assess your risk there. But it was a bad spot.
He drew the Ancient Grudge, which bought him a turn if it resolves. The Mystical Tutor, you countered it, but I imagine he would have gone for Time Walk. Oh, and he takes
Abrupt
the
Decay,
Sapphire.
I would say. Abrupt Decay is just
Decay.
a beating because I can't do anything about it. No Misdirection, no Mind Break Trap, no Divert. I mean, that card just completely stops my plan in its tracks. Now, the Jite would have stuck around, but I was really bottlenecked on mana. So here's a Preordain. Walking away from my 1-mana counters. More than likely, that means that I'm praying to hit a land and turn them back online, develop my mana, and continue my potential to disrupt them. But Spell Pierce and Flusterstorm start to get very unlikely to work as a singleton.
He's got 7 mana sources. Yeah.
At that point, we're looking at if he has to cantrip into cantrip and then eventually hit a bomb. So that does it there. Abrupt Decay did its work, but didn't buy him enough time there.
Nope. All right. Well, that was round 1. We'll see you round 2.